Chapter 5 of Ruth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Cynthia Lyons. Ruth by Elizabeth Cleghorn Gaskell. Chapter 5. In North Wales. The June of 18 year left blank had been glorious and sunny, and full of flowers, but July came in with pouring rain, and it was a gloomy time for travellers and for weather-bound tourists, who lounged away the days in touching up sketches, dressing flies, and reading over again for the 20th time the few volumes they had brought with them. A number of the Times, 5 days old, had been in constant demand in all the sitting-rooms of a certain inn in a little mountain village of North Wales, through a long July morning. The valleys around were filled with thick, cold mist, which had crept up the hillsides till the hamlet itself was folded in its white, dense curtain, and from the inn windows nothing was seen of the beautiful scenery around. The tourists who thronged the rooms might as well have been with their dear little bairnies at home, and so some of them seemed to think, as they stood with their faces flattened against the window panes, looking abroad in search of event to fill up the dreary time. How many dinners were hastened that day by way of getting through the morning? Let the poor Welsh kitchen maid say. The very village children kept indoors, or, if one or two more adventurous stole out into the land of temptation and puddles, they were soon clutched back by angry and busy mothers. It was only 4 o'clock, but most of the inmates of the inn thought it must be between 6 and 7. The morning had seemed so long, so many hours had passed since dinner, when a Welsh car, drawn by 2 horses, rattled briskly up to the door. Every window of the ark was crowded with faces at the sound. The leathern curtains were undrawn to their curious eyes, and out sprang a gentleman, who carefully assisted a well-cloaked-up lady into the little inn, despite the landlady's assurances of not having a room to spare. The gentleman, it was Mr. Bellingham, paid no attention to the speeches of the hostess, but quietly superintended the unpacking of the carriage, and paid the postilion. Then, turning round, with his face to the light, he spoke to the landlady, whose voice had been rising during the last 5 minutes. "Nay, Jenny, you're strangely altered, if you can turn out an old friend on such an evening as this. If I remember right, Pentré Voelas is 20 miles across the bleakest mountain road I ever saw." "Indeed, sir, and I did not know you, Mr. Bellingham, I believe. Indeed, sir, Pentré Voelas is not above 18 miles. We only charge for 18. It may not be much above 17, and we're quite full. Indeed, more's the pity." "Well, but, Jenny, to oblige me, an old friend, you can find lodgings out for some of your people. That house across the street, for instance." "Indeed, sir, and it's at liberty. Perhaps you would not mind lodging there yourself. I could get you the best rooms, and send over a trifle or so of furniture, if they weren't as you'd wish them to be." "No, Jenny, here I stay. You'll not induce me to venture over into these rooms, whose dirt I know of old. Can't you persuade someone who is not an old friend to move across? Say, if you like, that I had written beforehand to bespeak the rooms." "Oh, I know you can manage it. I know your good-natured ways." "Indeed, sir. Well, I'll see. If you and the lady will just step into the back parlour, sir. There's no one there just now. The lady is keeping her bed to-day for a cold, and the gentleman is having a rubber at whist in number 3. I'll see what I can do." "Thank you, thank you. Is there a fire? If not, one must be lighted. Come, Ruthie, come." He led the way into a large, bow-windowed room, which looked gloomy enough that afternoon, but which I have seen bright and buoyant with youth and hope within, and sunny lights creeping down the purple mountain slope, and stealing over the green soft meadows, till they reached the little garden, full of roses and lavender bushes, lying close under the window. I have seen, but I shall see no more. "I did not know you had been here before," said Ruth, as Mr. Bellingham helped her off with her cloak. "Oh yes, 3 years ago. I was here on a reading party. We were here above 2 months, attracted by Jenny's kind heart and oddities, but driven away finally by the insufferable dirt. However, for a week or two it won't much signify." "But can she take us in? I thought her saying her house was full." "Oh yes, I dare say it is, but I shall pay her well. She can easily make excuses to some poor devil, and send him over to the other side, for a day or two, so that we have shelter. It does not much signify." "Could not we go to the house on the other side, and have our meals carried across to us in a half-warm state, to say nothing of having no one to scold for bad cooking? You don't know these out-of-the-way Welsh inns yet, Ruthie." "No, I only thought it seemed rather unfair," said Ruth gently. But she did not end her sentence, for Mr. Bellingham formed his lips into a whistle, and walked to the window to survey the rain. The remembrance of his former good payment prompted many little lies of which Mrs. Morgan was guilty that afternoon, before she succeeded in turning out a gentleman and lady, who were only planning to remain till the ensuing Saturday at the outside. So, if they did not fulfil their threat, and leave on the next day, she would be no very great loser. These household arrangements complete, she solaced herself with tea in her own little parlour, and shrewdly reviewed the circumstances of Mr. Bellingham's arrival. "Indeed, and she's not his wife," thought Jenny. "That's clear as day. His wife would have brought her maid, and given herself twice as many airs about the sitting rooms, while this poor miss never spoke, but kept as still as a mouse. Indeed, and young men will be young men, and as long as their fathers and mothers shut their eyes, it's none of my business to go about asking questions." In this manner they settled down to a week's enjoyment of that Alpine country. It was most true enjoyment to Ruth. It was opening a new sense. Vast ideas of beauty and grandeur filled her mind at the sight of the mountains, now first beheld in full majesty. She was almost overpowered by the vague and solemn delight, but by and by her love for them equalled her awe, and in the night time she would softly rise, and steal to the window to see the white moonlight, which gave a new aspect to the everlasting hills that girdle the mountain village. Their breakfast hour was late, in accordance with Mr. Bellingham's tastes and habits, but Ruth was up betimes, and out and away, brushing the dewdrops from the short crisp grass. The lark sung high above her head, and she knew not if she moved or stood still, for the grandeur of this beautiful earth absorbed all idea of separate and individual existence. Even rain was a pleasure to her. She sat in the window seat of their parlour. She would have gone out gladly, but that such a proceeding annoyed Mr. Bellingham, who usually, at such times, lounged away the listless hours on a sofa, and relieved himself by abusing the weather. She saw the swift fleeting showers come athwart the sunlight like a rush of silver arrows, and she watched the purple darkness on the heathery mountain side, and then the pale golden gleam which succeeded. There was no change or alteration of nature that had not its own peculiar beauty in the eyes of Ruth. But if she had complained of the changeable climate, she would have pleased Mr. Bellingham more. Her admiration and her content made him angry, until her pretty motions and loving eyes soothed down his impatience. "Really, Ruth," he exclaimed one day, when they had been imprisoned by rain a whole morning, "one would think you had never seen a shower of rain before. It quite wearies me to see you sitting there watching this detestable weather with such a placid countenance, and for the